Hi there, Father Fish. Guess what we're going to talk about today? We're going to talk about food, fish food to be specific. Not so much the kinds of food, but what food is and how to feed your fish. I had an old friend, I did a video on him, a man named Henry Hall. Henry Hall raised fish. Toward the end of his life, he raised large fish, very big fish. When I first saw his fish room, he had about 40 or 50 tanks. Not one of them was smaller than 100 gallons, and there was one fish in every tank. He fed his fish once every week or so. Some of them he only fed once every month. Here's why. When a fish eats, it runs through its food very quickly. Now, this is especially true of small fish. A fish will eat, digest its food, and poop it out within about 2 hours. Now, what this really means is that the fish is not digesting very much of the food it's taking in, about 10%, which means the rest of the food is laying on the bottom of the tank. And what do you suppose happens to it? Well, it's food, right? And fish are hungry, right? So it gets eaten again, and again, and again, and again, and maybe 5 times that food is eaten before it finally is relatively thoroughly digested. So, what this means is you need to be feeding fish that is high in food value. What does that mean? Well, remember what Henry Hall said. The best food for fish is fish. That's what fish eat in the wild, at least many of them do. Virtually all fish are either omnivorous or are predaceous. They either eat other fish or they eat fish and vegetables. Very few will only eat vegetables. There are a few, but really not very many. Even those fish that we credit as being full-blown vegetarian, they'll eat a piece of meat given the opportunity. Just watch that Plecostomus chow down on a carcass. So, we need to feed food that has high food value, such as fish, shrimp, chicken. I talked about chicken in another video. Any other kind of seafood, raw or blanched vegetables, are always very good. In other words, real food. But what about processed food? Well, let me put it to you this way. I had a customer walk in the store today, and she had a little container of pellets. Little tiny container, about that big around, full of very small pellets. She said she had been feeding it to her Betta for about a month, and he stopped eating it. So I took the bottle from her, and I looked at the ingredients. I think there was one ingredient that was actually a processed food. It was processed chicken. Processed down to the point where it wasn't even called chicken anymore. I can't remember what they called it. But this food had about 50 ingredients, most of which were chemicals. So what do you suppose happens when a fish eats that? Well, the good news is it probably uses up all of the food value in one sitting. So it gets pooped out, probably doesn't have very much food value left. In which case, it simply disappears into the substrate, providing a chemical foundation. Now here's the problem. The more of this you do, the more waste is produced, which could eventually foul the system, particularly if you have a substrate that does not act as a septic system and simply holds on to waste, much like a sewer, rather than breaking it down like a septic system does. So let's go back to food one more time. What does this mean in terms of the quantity of food that you put in the tank? Well, if 6 different fish are going to make a meal on one piece of food, that means you got to consider that. That means you feed 1/6 the amount or 1/5 the amount if you want all of those fish to have a meal. So you feed very, very, very sparingly. Feed tiny amounts of food. You can feed more than once a day. In fact, if you're raising baby fish, it's good to feed 3 or 4 or 5 times a day, every couple of hours or so. 3 to 4 hours apart is a good stretch. But it has to be a tiny enough amount that all of the fish will get a piece of it after 2 hours, after 3 hours, after 4 hours. So it becomes a kind of a chain. 2 hours worth of food lasts 4, 6, 8, and 10 hours. So that little bit of food you put in at the beginning is still being processed by the fifth fish down the line 10 hours later. Be careful then when you're feeding multiple times a day, and be conscious of the fact that what you put in there is being eaten again and again and again. think about it. Think about what you're doing. Be observant with what your fish are doing. Make sure they're always hungry. A hungry fish is a healthy fish. If your fish are no longer hungry, it's probably because they're sick. And they're probably sick because you're feeding them something that has little or no real food value, like that chemical concoction I talked about earlier. What are good foods? Omega-1 is one of the few very high quality foods that I like because it's made from whole fish. They actually have their own fishing boat. Now, this was a few years ago when I talked to them. I assume they're still processing food the same way. Let's hope so. You might check on it. But there, one, be mindful of what the ingredients are. If it has a lot of chemicals in it, that's to the detriment of food value. You want real food to feed your fish. The best way to do that is buy food at the supermarket or buy some of the frozen packaged foods that are available from your pet shop, or even live foods. I feed a lot of blackworm, daphnia, brine shrimp, earthworms, those kinds of things. Even the chicken is actually a live food. I mean, I don't throw a whole chicken in, but it's cut up real food. Fish the same way, shrimp, clams, anything like that is real food. And don't forget vegetables. Spinach, romaine, zucchini. Zucchini is a wonderful food. Garlic. Do feed garlic. It's a great quality food which very much helps your fish digestion. Get away from the prepared foods and start feeding real food to your fish. That's all for now. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Make some comments at the bottom, please. If you agree, disagree, or have another way, or think of something I didn't think of, that's certainly possible. The tank behind me is a 200-gallon with cichlids in it. It's primarily cichlids. Cichlids from all over the world. They're mostly African and South American, but a few other oddballs besides. They're all very healthy, all very active, busy little fish. Many of these are the monsters that people have grown out in their tanks that simply got too big and became too aggressive. So we've thrown them all in there together, and the aggression goes way down when the competition goes way up. Take care for now. Have a fishy day. Talk to you again soon. Please do subscribe. We need your subscriptions in order to keep this channel growing and be able to reach our goal. And be sure to hit the little bell so you can keep up with us as we post more videos like this, and it'll be shared with others. Bye for now. Father Fish signing off.